pause in quiet reflection to offer this prayer for a peaceful world. In our individual and personal ways, we call upon the Holy One who sustains our lives and who inspires us to live with the compassion and kindness and peace. We ask for daily guidance in all our personal relationships, in our work and play, and in our community involvement, that we might model the possibilities of peace in everything we say and in everything we do. We pray for wisdom and compassion within the hearts and minds of all world leaders who have the power and responsibility of making decisions that impact the presence of peace. We pray for courage, dedication, and integrity within the spirits of all those who work for peace around the world. We pray for all those who harbour thoughts and feelings of hatred and violence and greed, and that their hearts and minds and souls will be transformed into your likeness of compassion and kindness. We are thankful for your presence within our lives and ask for your blessing as we try to live peaceful lives and seek ways for all people to live in peace and justice. Give thanks and praise, I say.
Amen. Thank you, Malika. And we've tended to be slightly late in terms of the way we've started in the last couple of weeks. So I'm going to try and make sure we're not running quite as late this week as at the start. So welcome to all of you again. It's encouraging to see that we still have commitments. A few people have said they can't join us tonight, but are still very much on board, as I think many are who've not been able to join most of the workshops because of other things going on. But a lot of people still see the recordings and stay in touch with the work. It gives me great pleasure this evening to introduce Elizabeth Cameron, who basically has been involved with us since the start of this journey. Never afraid to step forward and say a few words, to address, to challenge, to push us on the right track. And it's really encouraging for us that you are still with us and committed to helping us to do this. So before I introduce Elizabeth, I would just like to point out that we are recording the session, the first part and the feedback from the breakout groups. And if that affects you and you want to put your camera off at any point, but hopefully with the speaker spotlighted, it shouldn't be a major issue. If there's any questions you want, anything you want to say, you can always put it in chat if you don't want to be heard as well. A quick reminder that this project is Faith in Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter. It's not saying that other lives don't, because we know all lives matter, but we know and we're very aware that there are issues to address in ourselves, in our communities, and that it's important to speak out, to step up, to address Black Lives Matter, and to make sure that we effect change and try to end racism in our communities, in ourselves, and in our society. So without further ado, I'm going to say welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being willing to challenge us and highlight behaviours and ways of addressing and looking at diversity. Elizabeth is a youth work manager. She has been involved with Unison for 25 years, an activist working for equality for change, overcoming injustice, and working for individual members and their rights. She is a community activist and probably has been for more than 25 years of that you've been working with Unison. Elizabeth is one of the members, as was Alison, who spoke with us a couple of weeks ago, of the Greater Manchester Race Equalities Panel, the new panel set up by Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, to address some of the issues and inequalities that are going on with racism within and around Greater Manchester. And finally, which is probably why she's here, she is a coach and trainer in diversity, and I think it is great to have another trainer training us, working with us. So without further ado, Elizabeth, over to you. Thank you very much, and all yours.
Thank you. Well, it's lovely to be here, and here in this professional capacity. I have to say that this environment for me actually took me through and saved me after Black Lives Matter came. And does that seem rather grand to say it saved me? Well, there weren't very many places I could go with how I felt as a result of Black Lives Matter. That event that happened as George Floyd was murdered in front of the eyes of the public affected me massively. It affected me in my workplace, and I wanted to talk about it. And I had a supervision, I think perhaps maybe about 5 days after George Floyd had been murdered. And they said to me, you know, blah, blah, you know, how are you? And I said, well, I'm not well, I'm not good. And they asked me why I wasn't good. And I explained that, you know, it's changed everything. It's like, did you not see it? Did you not, are you not affected by it? And not only were they not affected, but they had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. So then when I began to talk about all that it had brought up in me, I physically saw my supervisors, if you like, shrinking in their seats with what was too much passion, too much energy, too much emotion, too much, because all of it was there. Because for so many of us, this pent up, the pent up feelings of a lifetime, actually, of various types of aggressions, and I'll put it in that way. You know, people talk about a hostile environment as being about immigration and who's being let into the country. And I tell you, the things that made the hostile environment were far bigger than that. The things that were a hostile environment were being 4 years old, up to the age of being 11, when I was in a mixed school. It was still a punishment for the boys to be made to sit next to me. That's a hostile environment. To be singled out, to be ridiculed at times, to have to live through the whole teasing from teacher downwards about the figures of African women with drooping breasts and bracelets around their necks as being the only thing that I could possibly identify with, and me feeling quite, who am I? Because I didn't actually identify with that, and I had never seen a picture like that. My parents never told me about that person. And then lived through the stories, the gollywogs on the jar, the laughing that went with that, the still can't hear nuts, whole hazelnuts, without knowing that that was the song that they chived to say, you know, about being a chocolate drop and a chocolate this. So when you grow up with so much aggression, and they are aggressive terms, you know, it's not just the really severe name calling that is the impact of racism, or that creates the hostile environment that Theresa May tried to achieve with her different immigration rules. So where was the support coming from at work? And that's why I'm here. Not to talk about that particular support, which it's fine if we do bring up how people felt around that, but really to discuss what is racism when it manifests itself at work. And I do apologise, that's a notification, I silenced the phone. So what does it look like? Do you recognise it? Do you think you've seen it and didn't challenge it? Is there something you can do about it? Have you ever inadvertently done some discriminatory behaviours yourself? You know, you'll hear about unconscious bias and how this has created a behaviour in terms of our response to people who are racially diverse. And when I'm talking, I'm probably talking about Black in the sense of Black and brown faced, because it is people with Black and brown faces, perhaps like me, who will get some of the sorts of discrimination that I'm going to discuss here tonight. And so I say that because I want people to know I'm not excluding any other forms of discrimination or racism because you are an immigrant to this country. Absolutely not. But what I'm talking about is what happens when you walk in a room and you're me. Now, Alison gave us some very thought-provoking training the other day. I really enjoyed it. So I decided not to go to the slides, and looking at the time, I can catch us up a little bit if we go straight into groups. So what I'm going to do is maximize the time that we're here and take us into groups in a couple of minutes. But I'll tell you that my background is, yes, as Warren said, many more years than just 25 years in the line of activism. I would say certainly from the speech I gave in Longsight, that I probably really saw it, apart from all that's gone through my school years, which you didn't even bother to say anything about, you know, the walking through the gamut of skinheads either side of the passageway, you know, the ginnels of the terraced houses that there used to be in Cheetham Hill in those days. And actually, I didn't realise that Malika was very close to where I was geographically. My first house was on Smedley Lane, and we went to a school that was St Chad's. It was Cheetham Hill. And I eventually went to live in Prestwich when I was 3. And we used to come down to school. You have to change buses at Queen's Road. And that was a gathering place for many people, a bus exchange, you know, you're going to see a lot of people there. And you used to be made to walk, if you had to walk towards the bus to get on, and there were skinheads there. I'll never forget the braces, the turned up jeans, the purple Doc Martens, or the spit that I had to take out of my hair, or cleaning, or putting my hood up of my anorak just to block those sorts of behaviours that they gave towards me. They form your opinion on who certain people are. And you want to move past all these things in a world that is full of diversity, and for which I didn't carry that proverbial chip on my shoulder. But when I came into the workplace, I started to see these sorts of behaviours rear their ugly heads again. And the behaviours were so similar to what I saw in the school days, what happened to you in the playground, that it was actually remarkable, except that there was this power there, the power to actually change your life by this behaviour. And so I became a passionate fighter for anti-discrimination, anti-racism really, in the workplace. Because as I wrote the anti-discriminatory practice policy for Salford many years ago, It was rooted in the fact that my entry into the trade union movement came because I received racist treatment, sexist treatment, and discrimination against my disability when I was working for Manchester City Council. And I got brave enough through the help of one person to take this to a union. Hadn't really known the work of unions. She said, take it to a union, they will support you. And they did support me as much as they could because the case had already started. But the important thing was that by the time I won this case, but because I won it, the manager made it his mission to destroy me and take me out of the workplace. He used every tactic in the book and other members of staff that were there in order to actually break me down. Now, you wouldn't think that that was possible in an organisation. Obviously, it wasn't a million years ago. I'm not that old. But, you know, that somebody would be allowed to do that. So I told you that story for a very distinct reason, because it's kind of, I think sometimes people think it's a world away out there and people, what could people really do? Well, what people really do is put people on tranquilizers. What people really do is cause massive distress. So what we're going to do in our groups, in order for me to address what I would have put in your presentation, in your physical presentation, I'm going to ask you to answer three questions, please. So the first one is, what would be the experience of Black workers in the workplace experiencing discrimination? So it's, what do you think you would see? How do you think discrimination would be shown? And how would you address it? And I have one too. I thought we might do two. I don't know if we're doing two breakout sessions, but if we're doing one, that's the one that they're the questions I would like to ask. So if you would discuss in your groups those questions, I can rewrite them again, but I didn't have a screen sharing, so I just got rid of the presentation. It's here, but it's easier if you just answer those questions. So
Elizabeth, can you just say what the questions were again? Because I only got one.
Of course. So what would be the experience of Black workers in the workplace? So just what do you think is the general experience of Black workers in the workplace? The second question, how would you think discrimination would manifest itself within the workplace? Third one is, how would you address discrimination in the workplace? How would you challenge it? Or could you challenge it? So they're the questions to discuss.
Is that in general, Elizabeth?
Yes, ask away.
Or within our own?
I think you could say, I mean,
or whatever.
Yes, within your own area of work.
Yeah.
Answer towards your own area of work. That's where we're expert, and that's where it matters. What's within your own sphere of influence. So for your sphere of influence, please think about the experience of racism in the workplace. And if you can extend it, please, obviously we're in different circumstances in a faith context, but if you could extend that, and then I'll come back to you with the legislations and so forth. Okay.